From the shrines to the church, a Yoruba tale, as narrated by Femi, Ayo's son. Let me tell you a story. It is the story of my father Ayo, who dared to stand alone against the gods of his people. It is the story of how his sacrifice planted a seed that blossomed into a mighty tree. But most of all, it is the story of how the people of our village turned from darkness to light, and how his grandson Owolabi carried the torch of faith. In our village in western Nigeria, long before I was born, life revolved around the worship of Ogun, the god of iron, and Sango, the god of thunder. Every family had an altar, and sacrifices were made to these gods for protection, fertility, and bountiful harvests. My grandfather was the priest of Sango, and my father Ayo was expected to continue in the tradition. But Ayo was different. He was not like other men in the village. Even as a boy, he questioned the rituals and the gods. One day, a wandering preacher passed through our village, speaking of a man called Jesus Christ, who died to save humanity from their sins. My father listened to him in the secret and was captivated. When Ayo turned 25, he did something unthinkable. During the annual festival of Sango, when the whole village gathered to honor the gods with sacrifices and dances, my father stood up and declared he no longer believed in Sango or any of the other gods. Instead, he said he believed in the one true God of heaven and earth. My father was disowned by his family and cast out of the compound. He was beaten and mocked, and many people refused to sell food or allow him into our homes. Ayo, the madman, they called him, for who would abandon the gods of his ancestors? But my father did not back down. He began preaching in the marketplace, telling anyone who would listen about the love of Christ. At first, people ignored him, but gradually, a few curious souls came to hear him speak. Among them was a young widow named Aduni, who would later become his wife and my mother. The village elders were furious. They accused my father of bringing misfortune upon the village. When the rains delayed one planting season, they blamed him. When a child fell sick, they said it was Ayo's cause. My father was dragged before the council and warned to stop preaching, but he refused. One fateful evening, as my father returned home from a small gathering of believers, he was ambushed. The men who attacked him were led by his own elder brother, who could not bear the shame Ayo had brought upon the family. Oh, they beat him severely and left him for dead in the forest. I was only a boy of 5, but I remember how my mother wept when they brought his body back to us. He was buried in a shallow grave behind our small huts. Only a handful of believers were there to mourn him. But my father's death was not the end. His words, his courage, and his faith had left a mark on the hearts of those who heard him. Years passed and I grew up hearing stories of my father's bravery. Though life was hard and my mother and I never lost faith, we held secret gatherings in our homes, praying and studying the Bible. When I became a man, I married and had children of my own. Among them was a boy named Owolabi, my first son. From the day he was born, there was something extraordinary about him. He was wise beyond his years and had a natural gift for speaking. At the age of 20, Owolabi began preaching just as my father had. But unlike my father, Owolabi lived in a different time. Christianity had begun to spread in this region, and there were churches in some neighboring villages. Still, our village clung stubbornly to its gods. Owolabi was fearless. He confronted the priests of Sango and Ogun, challenging them to prove the power of their gods. When they called down the curses on him, nothing happened. Instead, Owolabi prayed and people were healed. The blind saw, the lame walked, and the sick were made whole. The village could no longer ignore him. Even the elders began to question the beliefs. Slowly, people started leaving the old ways and coming to church. The turning point is this. One day, Owolabi stood before the shrine of Sango and prayed. A great wind blew through the village and the shrine crumbled to the ground. It was a sign no one could deny. The people rejoiced and the old gods were abandoned. By the time Owolabi was 30, our village was known as a place of faith and miracles. My father's dream had come true, though he did not live to see it. Moral lesson. Today, when people ask me about my father, I tell them this. Ayo was a man who gave his life for what he believed in. He sowed seeds of faith in rocky soil, and though he did not live to see the harvest, it came in abundance through his grandson. This lesson is very clear. True change often begins with one person who dares to stand alone. It may cost everything, but the light of truth can break even the heaviest chains. And so, my father's story lives on, not in the idols that once ruled our village, but in the faith that now unites us.